This day in history. The attack of 9/11/2001 on the World Trade Center and the United States. On September the 11th, 2001, 19 militants associated with the Islamic extremist group Al-Qaeda hijacked 4 planes and carried out suicide attacks against targets in the United States. 2 of the planes were flown into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City. A 3rd plane hit the Pentagon just outside Washington, D.C., and the 4th plane crashed in a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Almost 3,000 people were killed during the 9/11 terrorist attack, which triggered major U.S. incentives to combat terrorism and defined the presidency of George W. Bush. At 8:45 a.m. on September the 11th, a clear Tuesday morning, the American Airlines Boeing 767, loaded with 20,000 gallons of jet fuel, crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. The impact left a gaping, burning hole near the 80th floor of the 110-story skyscraper, instantly killing hundreds of people and trapping hundreds more in the higher floors. As the evacuation of the tower and its twin got underway, television cameras broadcasted live images of what initially appeared to be a freak accident. Then, 18 minutes after the first plane hit, a second Boeing 767 United Americans Flight 175 appeared out of the sky, turned sharply toward the World Trade Center, and sliced into the South Tower near the 60th floor. The collision caused a massive explosion that showered burning debris over surrounding buildings and onto the streets below. It immediately became clear that America was under attack. The hijackers were Islamic terrorists from Saudi Arabia and several other Arab nations, reportedly financed by the Al-Qaeda terrorist organization of Saudi fugitive Osama bin Laden. They were allegedly acting in retaliation for America's support of Israel, its involvement in the Persian Gulf War, and its continued military presence in the Middle East. Some of the terrorists have lived in the United States for more than a year and had taken flying lessons at American commercial flight schools. Others had slipped into the country in the months before September 11th and acted as the muscle of the operation. The 19 terrorists easily smuggled box cutters and knives through security at 3 East Coast airports and boarded 4 early morning flights bound for California, chosen because the planes were loaded with fuel for the long transcontinental journey. Soon after takeoff, the terrorists commandeered the 4 planes and took the controls, transforming ordinary passenger jets into guided missiles. As millions watched the events unfolding in New York, American Airlines Flight 77 circled over downtown Washington, D.C., before crashing into the west side of the Pentagon military headquarters at 9:45 a.m. Jet fuel from the Boeing 757 caused a devastating inferno that led to the structural collapse of a portion of the gigantic concrete building, which is the headquarters of the U.S. Department of Defense. All told, 125 military personnel and civilians were killed in the Pentagon, along with 64 people aboard the airliner. Less than 15 minutes after the terrorists struck the nerve center of U.S. military, the horror of New York took a catastrophic turn when the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapsed in a massive cloud of dust and smoke. The structural steel of the skyscraper, built to withstand winds in excess of 200 miles an hour and a large conventional fire, could not withstand the tremendous heat generated by the burning jet fuel. At 10:30 a.m., the north building of the Twin Towers collapsed. Only 6 people in the World Trade Center at the time of their collapse survived. Almost 10,000 others were treated for injuries, many severe. Meanwhile, the 4th California-bound plane, United Flight 93, was hijacked about 40 minutes after leaving Newark Liberty International Airport in New Jersey. Because the plane had been delayed in takeoff, passengers on board learned of the events in New York and Washington via cell phones and airphones calls to the ground. Knowing that the aircraft was not returning to the airport as the hijackers claimed, a group of passengers and flight attendants planned an insurrection. One of the passengers, Thomas Burnett Jr., told his wife over the phone that I know we're all going to die, and there are 3 of us who are going to do something about it. I love you, honey. Another passenger, Tom Beamer, was heard saying, "Are you guys ready? Let's roll," over an open line. Sandy Bradshaw, a flight attendant, called her husband and explained that she had slipped into the gallery and was filling pitchers with boiling water. Her last words were, "Everyone's running to first class. I've got to go. Bye." The passengers fought the 4 hijackers and are suspected to have attacked the cockpit with a fire extinguisher. The plane then flipped over and sped toward the ground at upward to 500 miles an hour, crashing into a rural field near Shanksville in western Pennsylvania at 10:10 a.m. All 44 people aboard were killed. Its intended target is not known, but theories include the White House, the U.S. Capitol, Camp David, and several nuclear power plants along the eastern seaboard. A total of 2,996 people were killed in the 9/11 attacks, including the 19 terrorist hijackers aboard the 4 airplanes. Citizens of 78 countries died in New York, Washington, D.C., and Pennsylvania. At the World Trade Center, 2,763 died after the 2 planes slammed into the Twin Towers. That figure includes 343 firefighters and paramedics, 23 New York police officers, and 37 Port Authority police officers who were struggling to complete an evacuation of the building and save the office workers trapped in the upper floors. At the Pentagon, 189 people were killed, including the 64 on American Airlines Flight 77, the airline that struck the building. On Flight 93, 44 people died when the plane crashed in Pennsylvania. Our president, George W. Bush, was in Florida at the time of the attacks and had spent the day being shuttled around the country because of security concerns. At 7 p.m., he returned to the White House. At 9 p.m., he delivered a televised address from the Oval Office declaring, "Terrorist attack can shake the foundation of our largest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the American resolve." In reference to the eventual U.S. military response, he declared, "We will make no distinction between terrorists who commit these acts and those who harbor them." Now, Operation Enduring Freedom, the American-led international effort to oust the Taliban regime in Afghanistan and destroy Osama bin Laden's terrorist network based there, began on October the 7th. Within 2 months, U.S. forces had effectively removed the Taliban from operational power, but the war continued as U.S. and coalition forces attempt to defeat the Taliban insurgent campaign based in the neighboring Pakistan. Osama bin Laden, the mastermind behind the September 11th attacks, remained at large until May 2, 2011, when he was finally tracked down and killed by U.S. forces at the hideout in Pakistan. In June 2011, then-President Barack Obama announced the beginning of a large-scale troop withdrawals from Afghanistan. Our country has changed in many ways since 9/11. 9/11 has become synonymous with danger, with endurance, with patriotism, watchfulness, and the resolve of Americans.